Well, good evening. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Cumberland County Finance Committee at 5:03 p.m. Want to begin with just some introductions, introducing who's in the room this evening. So I'll start with myself and then work my way to the left. I am Chair Dustin Ward, and I represent New Gloucester.
Hi, I'm Paul Turog, and I am here from Bridgeton Select Board.
Commissioner Susan Watonis with District 2.
Kevin Joyce, Cumberland County Sheriff.
Tim Coolidge, GLS Chair, Cumberland County Sheriff.
Frank Smith, Cumberland County Sheriff.
Right across the row here.
Tom Mulcahy, Casco. John Johnson, Western.
Okay.
Terry Moss from Naples.
Brian Miller, Chief Deputy of the Sheriff's Office. Harry Jules, Joel Captain, Sheriff's Office.
That's it. Tracy.
Teresa Grover, Finance Director.
Alex Kimball, Deputy County Manager.
Jim Gailey, County Manager.
Bob Vale, Town of Cumberland, Town Council.
Thank you all for being present. Really appreciate it. We'll start with a little order of business. We'll do the approval of the minutes from January 16. I believe they were sent out. You all had a chance to look at them. I'll take a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Paul, seconded by Bob. Any discussion? All those in favor? Very straightforward. Good. Jim, I'll hand it over to you to sort of prep us before we enter into public comment.
Okay, great, thank you. First of all, you might see this contraption in front of me. We do have some commissioners that have other commitments this evening. They wanted to participate, so I've hooked them up through Zoom. And so this eye here will bounce back and forth wherever a voice is. So that's what's happening here. We are also videoing this meeting, so that's going to be the true public record. We are not videotaping the Zoom call here. But we have two commissioners, Commissioner Smith and Commissioner Gordon are online, just for transparency here. Just wanted to tee up the Sheriff's Office budget. This year's budget with the administration and law enforcement sides together is up $671,000 or 8.2%. There is a civil budget, which is largely taken by revenue and covered by revenue. That's only up 1%, just over $4,000. And you may have heard me raise concerns around the civil budget in the past that revenues were not meeting up with expenditures. I know Captain Smith from the Sheriff's Office did a good amount of work over the last couple of years, and recently there was a legislation that was passed that increased the fee structure for civil, the civil division, and that has paid dividends. We are seeing revenues now coming within the ballpark of expenditures. So we are not really focusing on civil this year because of that. I just wanted to make that known. The other item that we have been watching is car sales. We have really been all over the place with what the budget for vehicles. We landed after dialogue with other county managers and other town and city managers within the region on what they were paying this past fall for vehicles. We landed at $45,000. I'm here tonight to say that we're probably going to be shy of that. We're going to have to add money to the budget. I'm estimating probably about $5,000 a car, if not $6,000 a car, as I have received a recent quote from MHQ, which we have purchased vehicles in the past as recently as this past year, who has given me a budget estimate here of a 2024 is going to be $48,000. So I think we need to be up in the $50,000 range, and for a Ford Explorer. Maybe a little more for a Tahoe, but MHQ has given me an indication that good luck getting a Tahoe because they've already been notified that they are limited and probably are going to be put off to 2025 models. So I'm here to say that we're probably going to be needing to pack about $40,000 to $45,000 into the budget that is not in there today. What's that do? That adds the total increase for the department up just over $711,000. or 8.7%. What's it do to the total budget? It goes from 4.86 to 4.97. So pushing the 5% range. Some of the highlights I wanted to touch base on law enforcement, why we're seeing such an increase in that line. Union contract kicked in, and that's kicking in the second year, because our first year was a transition year. In that union contract is calling for a 4% wage increase. It is also the first year of a new main PERS plan. They received an elevated, I think it's 3C plan for the unit. We also had to bake in cell phones for deputies. That was something that was not in the past. And also stipends increased across many of the different disciplines, one of them being the school resource deputy. So hopefully I didn't take too much thunder out of the sheriff's presentation here, but I thought it would be beneficial to just to tee it up and at least report out what we're learning on the car. And I own it. I was the one that cut it down to 45,000, and we need to add money, and you'll see that during your wrap-up session. So, Sheriff, it's all yours. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Well, hang on just a second. So, we want to get to public comment in just a minute. But one of the things I wanted to just share is, first and foremost, we have had each department come in and sort of give us an overview and a presentation. We also want to honor all the voices that you've brought with you in the room as well. So one of the things that I would like to offer is if anybody wanted to make any public comment regarding tonight's conversation and budget, more than happy to have anybody step to the mic. So if there was anybody in the audience or anybody in the public that wanted to make a comment, I wanted to offer that opportunity tonight. Any online public comment or any other written comment?
We do not have any written comment. Either commissioner have anything thus far? They're saying no. We're all good.
We're good. All right, Sheriff Joyce, go take it away.
Thank you. First of all, I want to, we have 3 people from, this year I started a Sheriff's Advisory Committee that basically, it's individuals, volunteers from each district of the county that matches up with the county commissioners. Something so I can be transparent on the law enforcement side and run budgets through, et cetera. So we have 3 people today with us, John Thompson, Terry Mulks, and Tom Mulkern out of the 6 that are on there. I also invited our jail board of visitors. That's something that's been in place since 2011, but they're not here tonight. Those individuals, by statute, the statute's getting stronger and stronger. When I started it, it was voluntary, and I wanted a group, and then now it's gotten to the point where, you know, they have to meet 4 times a year. It has to be certain people from the public, et cetera, and stuff. So they're not here tonight, but just another group to bounce things off. I get information from the public, and I just need somebody to go, hey, am I thinking the right way, or, you know, am I way off track? So I've got my command staff, and mostly that is if you have a question I can't answer. I don't claim to know everything. I can at least point to them and say, hey, can you answer this on a micro level? We're accredited. We're a Triple Crown agency, and we take a lot of pride in that. Law enforcement is accredited. What's that mean? That we have to meet about 160 national standards in order to carry the CALEA. There's higher levels that require up to 400 standards. We're just at a basic law enforcement level. It's a national accreditation. ACA, we've been that way since 2014. ACA, the jail's been accredited since 2000, American Correctional Association. That's about 400 standards that we have to meet there. Again, national standards. For law enforcement, going back to CALEA, we're one of 7 in the state of Maine, the only sheriff's office. For accreditation for the jail, we're one of 3 in the state. The Maine State Prison is ACA accredited, as well as Somerset County. So we're one of 3. National Commission on Correctional Health Care, basically that is that the inmate health care in the jail is accredited as well. And they have to meet about 50 standards that are related to obviously medical and the services we provide there. And then lastly, another program that started out as a voluntary thing, and now it's pretty much mandated, is prison rape elimination, and that's for the jail. Basically, we have to meet certain standards that require cameras in certain places, reporting requirements, having somebody outside the agency so that, you know, if somebody's been sexually assaulted in the jail, they can call somebody outside, and it won't get swept under the rug if, you know, if it gets in the wrong hands and stuff. So we're proud of these. You know, it doesn't, it helps us with lawsuits. It doesn't keep us from getting sued, because you can sue anybody. But generally, the practices meet standards that are being met in California, Washington State, and Florida. And it's a voluntary program. Little bit about the Sheriff's Office. So we cover 15 towns out of 28 total. You know, it's Standish, Sebago, Baldwin, Raymond, Casco, Naples, Harrison, Gray New Gloucester, North Yarmouth, Pownell, Harpswell, and then Long Island, Chesapeake Island, and Fry Island in the summertime. We have contracts. We have a 7-person contract in Standish. That's 24/7, 7 days a week. We're basically the police department for Standish. For Harrison, that's an 80-hour a week, 2 deputies assigned to Harrison. In the summertime, we have a person covering from Memorial Day until about Labor Day in Naples, picking up some of the tourism there. Gray has got 2 year-round, and they gain an SRO for the 3 months that the SRO in Gray New Gloucester is not in school. Harpswell has 5. It's a bit unique in Harpswell in that we have 3 law enforcement deputies and then 2 Marine Patrol. Harpswell, clamming is a big thing in Harpswell. So we have 2 people assigned to testing the water, enforcing clamming regulations and laws, licensing, et cetera, down there. We have SROs in the Bonnie Eagle High School. We have an SRO in Lake Region High School, and we have an SRO in the Gray and Gloucester High School. In the summertime, Fry Island contracts with us. It's 0 residents today, but come June, it explodes into about 500 or 600 people out. And then, as I mentioned, we put a summer deputy out on Chesapeake and Long Island. The deputy actually goes out there and lives on the island. So when they're working their 40 hours, they're in a cruiser. When they go home, we encourage them to live out there, because if we need to call them out, then they come out on overtime. So really, that's what we have going on there. We also have a detective assigned to the DA's office to follow up on domestic violence. As I mentioned, 15 towns. Our population, our service population, that's adding up all of the 15 towns, is about 54,000 people. 3 towns are islands, and we're spread out over 836 square miles with 68 sworn law enforcement officers. In addition to that, the months of May, June, July, and August, we have 20 summer camps in the Sebago Lake region, just in the areas we patrol. 12 marinas, 14 campgrounds, 2 very popular state parks, Sebago Lake State Park, Bradbury Mountain. 11 lakes, of which Sebago, Little Sebago, and Long Lake are within our responsibility. 45 ponds and 10 rivers. Why is that important? Is because if you look at this particular chart, we're about 12,000 less, excluding the people that come into the city of Portland. Our service population is about 12,000 less than the city of Portland. They do it 158, we do it with 68. The ratio of a residence, as far as the international chiefs of police require, when they don't require it, they suggest 1.5 police officers per 1,000. You can see Portland's 2.3, understandably. We're 1.2. Now, I remember doing this a handful of years ago when we were under 1. So we've come up a little bit because the commissioners have funded some positions, but we're pretty inexpensive when you look at the $18 million for Portland, and excluding the jail and excluding civil, we're about $8 million, and we're 12,000 population. Again, our population explodes in the summertime, and we don't, we just move people into positions of contracts, but we don't really gain any people for that time. I also looked at, okay, if you took 3 towns with similar populations, the aggregate number, so I came up with Brunswick, Cape, and Scarborough, or Cumberland, South Portland, Westbrook. They have similar service populations, and you can see for yourself the square miles they cover, the number of officers they have, and their total aggregate budgets. Again, we're pretty reasonable as far as what we cover and our responsibility. Again, keep it in mind, less officers, a lot of square miles to cover, and populations. This budget, much like any other budget, the way we do it is I have the captains prepare a budget who then meets with the chief deputy. They put together their budget, which is their wish list, and then I look at it. And, you know, I determine whether or not it's something that I can defend in front of the county manager, the county commissioners, and you folks. They don't get everything, and in fact, this year we needed 9 cars. I cut 1 because the first thing on the list was a request for a criminal investigator. And this is for computer forensics. Now, every crime today committed involves one of these. You know, either somebody's on there, you know, looking at porn sites or kiddie porn, or they're stealing using the computer, or, you know, they're leaving a marker that I was here. And I'll talk about some of the crimes that we've had where the marker has been helpful. It's just that we have to rely on other people to actually get into these things and find out where was this person at this time, at this date. As I tell people in the public, our Achilles heel are these things. Because you can teach somebody how to investigate a robbery or a burglary or a sexual assault or anything, but it takes a special person to be able, I can barely turn this on, okay? It's a little bit over, but, you know, I've always said, if you have an 8-year-old, let them program your phone, because they understand it better than we do. The bottom line is, we don't have anybody in-house that can rip down a computer or a phone and give us the evidence. We have to rely on other people, and it's very time-consuming. So, they wanted a position. I said, well, how about a half a position? In other words, it starts half year. We've done that in the past. And in order to pay for that, I'll take a car away. So we removed the 9 cars down to 8. Instead of a full year criminal investigation forensic position, I put it in for a half year, about $53,000. We also added a administrative position for training. As you can imagine, when you have about 240, 250 employees, whether it's corrections, law enforcement, admin, training's a big thing. And we really have 2 people trying to manage that, making training requests, doing data entry, setting up hotels, setting up flights and stuff like that. So the training department wanted an assistant to just do data entry. Again, I put that in for a half a year to soften the blow. Things that increased, obviously ammunition, but, you know, I'll talk about that a little later in that we're looking to change firearms. The firearms we have are several years old, and my chief deputy was a firearms instructor with the feds, and he can more eloquently describe that, but the bottom line is, much like a car, you know, you start looking at 100,000, 150,000, the car kind of falling away. A firearm's built on how many rounds going through. And then you've got heat and cold and heat and cold and stuff. So we put in that at some point we need to change over, and we would actually go from a 40 caliber down to a 9mm, which most law enforcement agencies are doing. The 40 cal is a little overpowered. As Jim mentioned, the increase in annual personnel costs, that's good. You know, I think the commission has done a good job in that out of 68 people, we have 3 vacancies in law enforcement. That's unheard of in the area. You know, Portland's down 30 people, the state police are down 50. Some of the small departments, you know, they're down 2 or 3. Well, if it's a small department, 2 or 3 is a lot. So I think that, you know, there's a number of things driving that. I think that we have canines and the tactical team and dive team, accident reconstruction, drone operators. We've got schedules that, gives the individual at least a Saturday or Sunday off, depending. So I think that's probably why we're in the situation we are. I mean, I credit the commissioners. I also credit the union, because the union actually came with a schedule that I was kind of like, I don't know. But they came with a plan that, hey, if we overlap on Wednesdays, we can do our training on Wednesdays, because we do 4 10-hour shifts and it has to be an overlap. And everybody gets a Saturday or Sunday off. So our people, our folks in law enforcement get a Saturday or a Sunday off. Training, education. Training is a real big thing. Active shooter. I've often said that the only reason we haven't had an active shooter in the state of Maine is because we're lucky. We're not special, we're lucky. And we saw that it can happen in Lewiston. And we did active shooter training last year. And honestly, we ought to do that more. We ought to be doing driving more, because we drive a lot, we drive fast, and, it's those areas that I call low-frequency, high-risk areas that we should do. But the bottom line is, it's all about training, it's all about money, and it's all about being able to staff so that you can backfill. And then vehicles are an issue. There are a couple people, I've run into a couple people that think that we're sheriffs, so we ride on horses, and I've had to dispel that rumor. But we expect our people to carry a lot of stuff. There's no stopping by the PD on your way to a call to, I forgot this, I forgot this. We have some people on our tactical team, we have some people that are on the tactical and the dive team. We have some people that carry drones so that when they get there, they can put a drone in the area, et cetera. So, when I talk about vehicles, I talk about, the need for vehicles that are gonna be there when we need them. And then payload, you'll hear me talk about payload too. Sometimes it's not the cheapest vehicle, it's the one that fits the need for the person driving. So, why am I here tonight? Obviously, to answer your questions, but given everything that we put forth, I still need, in my opinion, the forensic investigator for half a year. We gave up a vehicle, which we just heard is about the cost of that half a year for the forensic investigator. The Secret Service will give us all the equipment, will give us all of the training we need in order to do it. We just need the person that's, assigned to that. And I'll go into why that's necessary. The training admin, I'll wait till next year or or a couple years down the road. I don't want to be the kid on the block that says, I want. Do I think I need both positions? Absolutely. But, the most important one, in my opinion, is the criminal investigator position. There are other things. The union contract required us to give cell phones to all the staff. That's a good thing. It's been a long time coming because, again, if you have a personal one of these and you start doing work-related stuff, if it goes to court, you could lose a lot of personal information. And we had a lot of people doing this. Also, we've gone to video body cameras. And they were able to work with the body cameras on their phones. The vehicles, again, it's one of those things where it's like the stock market, Today, it's $45,000 for a Ford Explorer, but we don't have a crystal ball of, in July, when these actually go out to bid, will $45,000 be enough? We also saw the big 3 car makers sign contracts in October, November, where they were gonna be giving their employees like 40% raises. So we can't expect that cars are gonna stay, at a certain level. I can't tell you what's gonna happen in July. They may be the same, they may be through the roof. There's not a lot of car makers that make police package vehicles. And, driving anything less than a police package vehicle for what we do doesn't make sense. Some of the things that have been covered, and I put this in because, they seem to be CIP, has been approved by the county manager. The firearm replacement, again, it's really not gonna, there'll be a marginal cost, but we can trade our guns in, so we'll get a little bit of money. The ammunition will be a little cheaper than the .40 caliber. The training is gonna be a wash, because we'll just issue them and we'll start qualifying with 9mm and stuff like that. So again, they would come into their life's end. Yearly calls for service. So we have 5 districts. District 1 is really the west side of Sebago Lake, Standard Sebago Bowl is what we call it. So we figure out the calls for service for that side of the lake. District 2 is Raymond, Casco, Naples, Harrison on the east side of the lake, the 302 side. District 3 is the Gray, New Gloucester, North Yarmouth, Pownell, that 4-place area. District 4 are the islands, Chebeague, Long, and Harpswell. And then District 5 is the agencies we support. You know, Cumberland, Bridgeton. You know, we often, they help us out, we help them out. You know, it goes back and forth. Wyndham quite a bit. Lately, we've been helping out the city of Portland and stuff with canines and stuff. So any calls that we get, we put in District 5, and those seem to be increasing a little bit. Why the current computer forensics? Again, this thing right here. Homicides, thefts, robberies, sexual assault, crashes, child pornography, missing persons, active shooter, numerous other crimes. Recently, we had a pellet gun case up in the Raymond, Casco, Gray area. Guy was driving around, guy that is old enough to know better, but he was driving around plinking cars. He actually shot a car and somebody was inside it. They got hurt. Real big concern. In fact, we actually put something on GME because we were looking for the guy. We found the guy due to some great police work. And the guy happened to be in an area where a window was shot out. And he happened to have an airsoft rifle right sitting next to him. And when we got him, we took the rifle and stuff, but he was headed to work. It just so happened he had the airsoft. You know, you never get the real truth. He had one of these. So we wanted to plot. Was he anywhere near the 10 incidents that occurred? I'm not sure if I sit here today that we've gotten the results back, but that happened in August, and we're still waiting to find out and confirm whether or not his phone pinged in the area that he was in, because that will be the icing on the cake. I don't think we've charged him yet because we're waiting for this, because it's kind of, we got to dispel the fact that he just happened to be an innocent person with an airsoft rifle in front of a place that got shot up on his way to work. Child pornography, we have one case where we've been waiting 6 to 8 months. We had a child sex predator, waited 6 months. Missing person, 6 months. This was an individual that I think was from the Harrison, Naples area. Family calls in around Christmas, and he was headed to Auburn, never showed up there, never turned home. We ended up finding him in the Androscoggin River. But again, you know, it's helpful if you have a missing person to be able to have somebody that knows what they're doing, go in and ping the phone and see if we can locate them. And then we've had a human trafficking case where it was several weeks. We couldn't really pin it down. So what do we have for resources? Gorham has an individual. Portland has an individual. Cumberland inherited an individual. They hired somebody from another PD, from what I understand. So they have the expertise. South Portland has at least one. The main computer crimes have, I don't know, 4 or 5 maybe people. And then we have some federal partners. Let's say we have 30. We have a lot of cases where these are involved and a lot of PDs requiring, you know, this service. It just would be easier to walk down the hall and say, you know what, we need this taken care of. We had a shooting at the Causeway in Naples. Thankfully, the guy left his phone behind, but it would have been helpful to be able to call one of our deputies and say, hey, you've got expertise, can you track this guy and find out where he's at and stuff. We had his phone, so there wasn't much he could do, and there wasn't much that we could get out of it. Any questions so far? I'm talking fast. All right, vehicles. They're a necessary tool. I think Jim's answered my comment there, so I guess you did steal my thunder a little bit. That I didn't think that cost was real. I'm not sure, again, I don't know. The only thing I can tell you is this. Whatever the price is, we need 8 vehicles in order to get the rotation. You know, I remember talking to a town, they said, well, you know, I drive a car that's got 175,000 miles. Well, that's a personal car. It's not taking the pounding that these are and stuff like that. So in order to keep that rotation, we need 8. And if we come in way under, I still need 8. Whatever the price is. The brand of vehicle, you know, we went to Ford's a few years ago because Chevy decided they weren't making it. We were doing the 2-wheel drive Chevys. They plowed through snow pretty good. If you're a supervisor, we did the sport utility Chevy Tahoe, 4-wheel drive. They were non-police package. But I didn't want to put deputies in a non-police package vehicle because they're not pursuit rated. The two-wheel drives were. Long story short, there's always been this going around with Ford and Chevy, you know. Chevy decided that they weren't going to make it, so we went to Ford's. That was good in that we at least could buy some vehicles, but then we had to go and get cages because nothing transfers over and the lights don't transfer and stuff. And we've been buying Fords because they're okay. I mean, they've got some mechanical issues, but what the car doesn't. The Chevy would too. My concern is the payload. Now, you're looking at a K-9's car right now. And I was at a standoff a couple weeks ago, and I was watching the guys get ready in the middle of the night, and I saw this K-9 vehicle, and he was trying to, when he opened the door, everything fell out. And he was trying to get his cold weather gear and stuff like that. And my point here is that, you know, for some people, the Ford Explorer might work. If it's an SRO that's not involved in a specialty, that might work. But if you've got somebody that's on the dive team, an ESU or a K-9, that payload, that extra space is helpful. I know it's more money, but, you know, it's one of the things that we can't control. I'd love to go buy a new pickup truck for myself, but the prices are unreal. And it's like, you know, it's like playing the stock market. If I buy now, will they be cheaper later, or they're probably not going to be? This was the supervisor's, and literally, you know, I was parked behind him. He was getting ready and on this call-out, and he basically had to push stuff in and shut the door. And then I looked inside his vehicle, and he had some of the stuff inside his vehicle, either up front, which is concerning, because if the car rolls, it's a death trap, that stuff's flying all around. Or if it's in the back seat, then depending on what it is, you have arrestees that are in there, and you don't want them filing through. So, you know, again, I'm not sure that a Chevy or Ford, I think that specific to the job and the person we're replacing the car for, a Chevy might be beneficial, more beneficial than a Ford, and vice versa. You know, the chief did some research, and, you know, there's, 87 cubic feet in a Ford Explorer, there's 122 in a Chevy. The difference is about 40%.
Sheriff Joyce, just a quick question.
Sure,
Does the Ford Expedition have a police package?
they do.
They do.
That's what we use, yeah.
So that would compare with a Tahoe?
Yes, yes. Now all Tahoes, even 4-wheel drives, are police package. It used to be that if you had a 4-wheel drive, it was not a police package. Therefore, it wasn't pursuit rated.
Right, right.
I think they're still making the 4x2s, which is the 2-wheel drive too.
Well, I wouldn't buy a two-wheel drive, period,
Yeah.
unless it was for patrol work. Have you priced out the Expeditions against the Tahoes and against the Explorers?
Yes, yes. And there, I want to say that the Tahoe is about 5,000 difference. So, it's funny, Jim said that Chevys, he was told that Chevys aren't going to be available. I've got an email from our dealership in in Augusta, that basically said, 2024 Explorers are very light on availability, gives a price. So we're hearing that the Fords, the auto manufacturers are messed up in that this is not a market for them. I mean, there's a lot of police departments buying these vehicles, but they don't make their money off them. So since probably 2012, we've seen nothing but just a sharp increase on the vehicles because of the fact that it's really not a moneymaker. They need to make them, but nobody's getting rich off it. So,
Can I jump in with a question? More of a broader question. How many, like, vehicles do you have, and what is your replacement policy? Do you have a strict, like in our town, we have a spreadsheet that says, here's all the vehicles that we have, here's how many miles they have, here's when their service life is expected to end. This is sort of our rule for replacement, and we go by that. And I'm hearing 8 vehicles, but I don't know how many you're starting with, and any value you're getting out of ones you're replacing, or are you increasing the fleet?
no, we're not increasing it. Every officer has an assigned vehicle, so you're not hot seating it. Somebody doesn't jump on, another one jumps in. 9 is our rotation. We're not adding anything. In fact, like I said, in order to get this position, I cut a vehicle, which puts a hardship. We typically run them into the ground, because once we take them off the front line, then we give them to a detective or administrator. Our mechanic, our fleet manager, does a real good job of working with the captain to determine what vehicles need to be taken off. If we can take a car off at like 50 or 70,000 miles, which is kind of low, then we'll try to reassign that to, somebody in the jail, administrator, or detective, stuff like that. So we're not looking to add. I mean, anytime you add a position, like if I were to get this CID position, I'm gonna have to
Put 'em in
take
something.
that from an older pass down, because I'm not asking for a car, I'm just asking for the position. So there's a rotation. We try to do, especially with the cars, about 125,000, because that's when they really start costing money, but we go over that. I think there again, I'm not a mechanic, but an 8-cylinder, I think, has a lot more durability than a 6-cylinder, especially when you're carrying weight and driving fast, but that, I'm not an expert at that.
Can I just say something?
Sure.
So, to answer your question, 4 years and 120,000.
Harry, can you come up closer so they can get picked up in the mic, please? Thank you.
The rule we use is 4 years, 120,000 miles. So it's not, it has to be 4 and, it's or. So it's either 4 years old or 120,000 miles. We take it off frontline patrol,
Okay.
use it elsewhere.
Okay. I was just thinking in terms of when you present your sort of budget back up to Jim, it might be helpful for him to see, well, not only for this year, but probably get a feel even for like the upcoming year, how many likely vehicles are going to be in the works.
Yeah, I think it's also, and that's a good point, we can do that. I think it's also important to understand that, like, I mentioned Standish has 7 deputies, they bought 7 cars, and they're on a rotation. Harrison is on a rotation. So, the county is not picking up the contracts, they're just picking up the general revenue deputies, the ones that don't have contracts. Follow me on that one? So even though we have like 68 cars, on the county's roll, it would be less, because the contracts pay for the cars and the repairs and stuff. And we have about 19 contracts, so 68 minus 19 gives you kind of what the aggregate number is and then the rotation. That make sense?
Yes, and so, and I guess the other way of putting it then is if Standish, for example, where I used to live in, we were quite glad that you took over the police department. That's an aside.
Yeah, we were.
But, so if one of the Standish cars were to be swapped out, we wouldn't be seeing it here at all?
No.
Okay,
Nope.
perfect.
Anything?
I just have a question on time frame. When you order, if you were to order 8 cars, you're making each one of those custom fit to the job description that it needs to? And how long does that take? Or you're buying all 8 retrofitted, and then there'll be minor schematics to make it fit whatever the job description, whether it's dive team or something else. So how does it usually work?
When we order, it goes out to bid.
Right.
We will have it generally drop shipped at MHQ,
Okay.
which is a place down in Massachusetts, and
Yeah.
they set it up. So then we have to take the car that's being replaced down, and they park the 2 cars and take one out, and,
Oh, okay.
change over things. And, if we got new equipment, that goes in. Radios, again, technology, sometimes have to be updated. Generally, the cars are set up the same, so that when you get in, you don't have to look for the flashlight being on the left side. It's always in the same place.
Right.
The canines are a little different. Those are built out differently with the cages and the door openings and stuff. As far as the specialties, we don't do anything special with those, do we?
Nope, they're all the same.
They're all the same.
Okay.
So everything's pretty much standardized.
Yeah.
And we look at safety too, because if, God forbid, it rolls, we want to make sure that we don't have flying objects in there.
How long would it take before you get that car on the road from the time that you make that, after it goes out to RFP and comes back?
About a year and a half.
Okay.
It's awful. Am I right on that year and a half? It's been terrible since COVID. In
Oh, yeah.
fact, we ordered, I think, 8, and we didn't get.
Yeah, we ordered 8 March 2023, we still haven't received them yet.
Oh, geez, okay.
You're trying to tell me that you order a car in July of '24 and it doesn't go into service until '25?
That could happen. I've had these conversations with the idea that this is what's been run, we've been running into this situation ever since COVID.
This is not a fire truck, and so it's a little bit of a stretch for me to think that you can't get a car.
Quicker than that. Right. We've missed, it's been about 18 months, the current batch we're waiting for, I ordered back in March 2023. And I've heard that they made it to MHQ, but to start,
So why don't you order 15 and sell 6 of them to somebody else?
maybe we should.
It's not a perfect science. It used to be pretty easy, and cruisers used to be under 20,000. Now it's complicated, they're expensive, and you play the game of, is Chevy gonna have enough, is Ford gonna have enough? It's just a real pain. All right, the other big operation, and I told the jail command staff today, I'm not sure what I'm fighting for here, is the jail. And the jail's funded a little differently than everything else. It's funded by property tax, not to exceed 4%. It's also funded by the jail, the state, but that's figured on the number of inmates. And it's also funded by federal inmates, which we haven't had any for a little over a year. A little bit about the jail, about 4,000 bookings, that's low. Pre-COVID, having being down on people, it was anywhere from 7,000 to 8,000 people a year. Total length of stay is about 12 days. Releases about the same. Our population today is 223, that's 227 in there. But we also have 54 inmates that are being watched outside by Maine pretrial. So that's helpful. We pay them to actually come in, and those low-risk individuals, put them out into the community, and they monitor them in the community. So you'll see that there's a cost for that, but it's helpful on the staff. The capacity is 570. Our transport unit, which is comprised of about 10 people, but right now I think we're a little under 10. They do about 983 transports a year, whether it's the court transfers to other correctional facilities, the hospitals. Offender programming, we had a lot more programs pre-COVID to try to help inmates not return, to lower the recidivism. And we're still trying to get ramped up on that due to staffing and being shut down for COVID and stuff. As I tell people that get kind of frustrated, whether they're judges, DAs, defense attorneys, we try to do the best we can with what we got. Everybody expects pre-COVID services, and we're trying to do that, but not at the capacity that we had pre-COVID. We do have some educational and treatment programs. Medication-assisted treatment, we've got 85 people in that, out of 227. Nationally, that's a little high, I'm told, but, these are individuals that, A, were on a medication-assisted treatment program when they came in, or have never had the opportunity, so they can sign up to start getting that medication-assisted treatment. Right now, it's Suboxone or Methadone. We prefer the Suboxone. The Methadone will do it if somebody's been on it, but a little bit more of an aggravation on trying to get it because it's a different, it's protected differently through the DEA. Right now, we have 63 vacancies in the jail. Yep, that's 63.
63 vacancies?
Vacancies?
Yes. Yep. Now, I was talking to a reporter today, and I said, but I'm celebrating at 63, because last year at this time it was 75.
So what is the actual staffing? I'm sorry.
What's that?
How many actual officers do you have on staff?
Well, Major?
So we have 63 officers, we have 23 budget open positions, and you'll see further down, you'll see the other number of openings that we have, but aren't budgeted for this year. Like
many
this
total?
position. So it comes out to, if you go to the next slide, it'll show.
48.
Yeah, 48 is the number.
That's 48 open, not budgeted, that's what you're saying?
Those
Yeah,
are, those
they're
are
positions,
approved.
but they weren't budgeted this year.
Okay.
And I can elaborate a little bit more on that at a later time.
So, yeah, we're looking to do the 23 budgeted open positions. You know, we were carrying a bunch of positions that, quite frankly, we knew we weren't gonna fill, so why put them into the budget and keep them there when it was kind of an impossibility? And they weren't cut, they're just not funded. So if we were able to, correct me if I'm wrong, if we were able to fill all 23, and then we had 2 extra, we could come in front of the commissioners and say, hey, we got 2 extra, can we get funded for that so that we can start building back to, I think it's 129 corrections officer positions that we're budgeted for.
If you were at 129 officers, would that be sufficient? Is that equivalent to the jail being at the full 570 capacity, or is it, what, if you had those full number of officers, what kind of jail capacity could they service?
So when we were pre-COVID, and we weren't at the full 129, but we weren't at the position we're in now, pre-COVID, we were as high as 525, but the average was about 425. Now, I'm hoping that one of the first things I do in the morning is check the census to find out what the inmate count is. If it goes 250 and we still have the openings we're at, I get a little nervous. If it goes up to 275, I'm real nervous, and if it's up to 300, I'm panicking, right? So thankfully, the police departments are summonsing in lieu of arrest when they can, which is good. The courts, I don't think, are up to full steam, which is good. Some of the judges understand the plight we're in, which is good. So we're trying to suppress that number, you know, at the number it's at. And as we build in and fill these positions, then, you know, we get a little bit more brave to say, okay, now we can start this and we can start that. So if we were up to the 129, you know, we could basically start taking on other inmates from other counties. You know, I'm gonna talk about, we're trying to bring in 10 feds to help kind of jumpstart that. We're currently housing 10 Oxford? Or not yet.
Negotiation.
But, you know, Oxford has a need to try to house some people, so it's like, okay, maybe we can bring some of that revenue in to help out. But again, it's kind of like, I think we're walking, we were crawling, now we're walking, and I'd like to get up to a run. But as I was telling a reporter today over the phone, because police departments are looking for people, corrections used to be the feeder program for law enforcement. If you couldn't get into law enforcement, you went into corrections, and it was a great training ground. In fact, most of our law enforcement people started there. And then they marked time, they got in the retirement system, then that transferred over to a police job. And then they took the police job, and, you know, we were the training for them. And I'm all set with that. But we don't even have that now. I mean, police departments can't even find people interested. So we're kind of, you know, we're seeing that is because anybody who wants to get into law enforcement, go right into law enforcement. They don't have to go into the jail and wait for an opportunity. So we're looking at the revenue opportunities. Again, you know, the marshal service, you know, housing their folks is helpful. But again, I have to protect the employees down there too. You know, if we turn up the heat a little bit, maybe, you know, that's fine. If you crank it right up to high, you know, we've got a lot of people that have been the glue, the foundation that's held that place together during some really difficult times. And if I lose a lot, it changes how that looks in the future. Some of the things in the budget, obviously food costs, we're seeing that, you know. We do have a contract, and that contract basically goes out and buys the food and provides it to the staff there that cook. Obviously, we're doing 3 meals a day, plus the employees eat down there. So it's about, you know, 600, 700, 800 meals a day that a staff of 5, with help from inmates, are cranking out. You know, again, I'm not sure what I'm asking for, because I don't think that the budget really has been formulated yet, but, you know, we've tried to just do a 3% increase, you know. In some cases, that may work out, in some cases, it doesn't necessarily work out. Main pretrial, the next to last bullet, you know, that's 300,000, 309,000. That's for those individuals that actually come in and look at inmates and determine if we can house, or not house people, but allow them to go out, and they take care of monitoring them so that it's off our back. Our goal is only the real serious, or the more dangerous, or the people that really should be in jail are in jail. There's a request, 3%, a request on cameras, as I mentioned, with PREA. You can imagine in any big building, there are certain areas that are blind. And there's plenty of opportunity for things to happen. So, you know, we know we'll never have 100% coverage, but, you know, increasing that is what the major's looking at. You know, our facility, we say the Cumberland County Jail's new. It's 30 years new. In fact, I was telling somebody the other day, if you go back and look at the last 2 jails before this one, we'd be looking at building another one. The Monroe Street Jail was built around the 30s and closed down in the 60s so that they could build a place that sat on this footprint right here. And then we went to the other. There's no reason that we have to replace this particular jail, but we got to put some money into the roof and some of the things that really drag a building down. So I try to remind people that it's a 30-year new building. It's not the new building everyone thinks. The major needs a vehicle, a Suburban. Now, you can only carry 2 people, 2 inmates in a Ford Explorer or a Tahoe, but a Suburban, you can get 5 in there. So, you know, we have a bus for large scale, moving people up to about 40. It's used pretty frequently to come up here to the courthouse. We have a van that will take like 10 or 12, and then, you know, we have some Ford Explorers that if you're just jotting around town with 2, you can do it. But we've got a Suburban that's got 166,000 miles in 2015. And funny, one of you mentioned it's not a fire truck, but, you know, these roads, the salt just eats away at, you know. I'm guessing that you replace fire trucks before they even get to 20,000 because of the wear and tear and stuff. So you can picture a vehicle that's on the road constantly since 2015 is, you know, it's serviceable right now, but God knows what the underpinning is going to look like in a few years. Safety equipment, you know, the major is asking for a 3%. And we try to move money around. If we see that we have money last year and we don't need it, then we try to move it down here because we might need something else. You know, I think the major tried to stay within about 3%, knowing that, you know, 4% is all we can go up. But again, for the people costs, and I support that because that's the only way we're going to get people to come work for us is to pay them correctly, because there's a lot of competition in Southern Maine. that 5% for the collective bargaining coming up in the upcoming budgets, you gotta support it, because you'd be foolish not to. And then, again, talking about the 48 unfunded positions, we carried them for a long time, you know, and we knew we weren't gonna fill it in a year, so why carry it on a budget when I could use something else for that? Something that long-term that we want to talk about is, you know, canine in the jail. Right now, we have the police canines come in, and we've been pretty lucky in that during COVID, I really feared we would have a riot. I mean, we took away visits, we made people wear masks, we had low staffing levels, and inmates watched that stuff. But, you know, through the jail command staff and the jail staff, they held it together. They gave, you know, now the inmates have tablets so they can communicate. We're getting better with the visits. I don't think we're still a little short, in my opinion, on giving rec to the inmates. In other words, you know, they can go outside in their pod and stuff, but actually going down to the gym and shooting hoop and stuff. You know, Captain Costello does a good job of having a basketball tournament where he gets inmates to come out and they play against each other, and, you know, he has fun with those folks. But, you know, we're still trying to get back to where we were. And then the other thing is, we've got a building that's across it's the first building when you drive on the campus, called the Community Corrections Center. It was a blue ribbon program that I inherited. And it was individuals that were gonna get released within 6 to 9 months. They could petition to go over there. It was dormitory style. And it was kind of like a place that we could reacclimate people, teach them the responsibility of paying rent. They paid $100 a week. We'd send them out to work, and they would come back at night and sleep there. They got their programming. We set them up to be able to have a license or an ID so they could cash a check when they left. We did the AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. You know, this was where they kind of lived in a college setting. So that when they walked out the door, they weren't walking from being locked up. You know, we put some trust. We had some people walk away, and I remember my first walk away, I was frustrated. But then I realized that this is where you build trust, and if they walk away, we'll get them. And they show that they break trust. I mean, we've had people walk away 2 days before they get released. You know, I think in some cases, they probably didn't want to get released, and they get charged with, you know, escape. But, you know, the bottom line is, I would like to open that program up, but we're not there yet. You know, I don't know what that number is. Somebody asked the other day, and I said, you know, I guess it would be one of those things where if I feel like the hiring is going and things are working, that might be the time to open it up, but I can't get a timeline, and this person wanted a timeline. We had people actually go out and work for some of the communities. You know, we had individuals go over and work at the Cumberland Fair, do some painting, do some construction. We had some people go out in Westbrook, plant flowers and stuff like that. That was the Community Works program out of the Community Corrections Center. But again, right now, we're just maintaining our main role, and that's to keep people safe and secure in a humane manner. That's our goal. Lastly, this is really just a breakdown of our budget. And it shows you what little bit, the jail is most of the budget. As a recap, you know, I don't want to be sitting here telling you that I can get everything and I'm a spoiled brat. What I want to say is the vehicles are a concern. There needs to be flexibility. Sounds like the county managers recognize that. I do want consideration for the forensic investigator, because I think it's necessary. You know, I think in an email that the county manager said, we're 1.2% increase, I guess if you consider the jail, out of a 1.6% increase in the total budget for the county. But the bottom line is this: the jail has always been kind of funded that way, and again, I'm not sure what I'm asking for, because we kind of back into it. The law enforcement, I will just say this. You see what we're up against. If you take the aggregate of 3 towns that have the same population, we're pretty cheap, and 53,000 to start this program is really, if I leave here with that consideration and the vehicle concern, I think I'm a happy camper. So, thank you for your time, and I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Sheriff, I appreciate that. Questions from this group?
I got a whole pile of them.
Go ahead.
So, I'm gonna start off kind of in a reverse order, because I really want to go back to what you presented us here tonight, but my conversations with my council and the people in my community is, what does county government do to me? What can county government do to the town of Cumberland to help us, and by extension, help you? And so, we talked about the services that, for general assistance that the county took over for us. That's a real cost savings, it's a real benefit. So, I had 3 phone calls today. One was with my town manager, the other one was with my chief of police, and the third one was with Ronnie Kopp, who I'm sure you know. And so, so the questions were kind of all over the place. I said, why don't you reload your own ammunition? Was one of them. And of course, I got a good explanation on that, and we talked with cars with Ronnie, and then I talked with the town manager about, well, what can the county do more that saves us money? So, I think, you know, I'm going to scratch my head on that one for a while. But so, the things that I look at, and granted, we're 3 volunteers. We've got no authority.
I like to think we do.
Yeah, we think we do.
Don't underestimate yourself.
So I look at line items in a budget year to year, and so the things that jump out at me, and I mentioned this to the county manager here. As I said, we got a huge electric bill. I see a huge sewer bill. I see huge insurance costs, and so to me, for you to get what you want, we have to start whittling down our operational expenses. And so, you know, we are a county. There are fields all over the place. We need a solar field, and I've said that to the manager. You know, our electric costs are not going to go any place but up. And I'm looking at the gas costs here. And
Gasoline or natural?
propane or natural gas, and you know, it's $200,000. You know, buy a few cars for $200,000. So we need to be, you know, I don't want you to become an engineer, because that just detracts from what your real job is. But I think that all of us collectively need to think a little differently about what things cost, how they cost, how we fund them, and frankly, how we all work together. And so services, you know, I've been pushing my own town manager. We have a solar field, and I said, we need to expand this. We need to expand this, because we're adding more. We're adding electric cars to the fleet. We're adding more heat pumps. We're, you know, building new buildings. So our demand isn't going down. It's planted for the future. So I guess, you know, when I listen to your presentation here, you're half person here for computer crimes. You know, why isn't it a full-time position, and how can you fund that by providing services to more communities, and say, I want to bring a person on, but I want to make it a full-time person. What can we do you know, you want a piece of this. We had we have a lot of young fellows in Cumberland, and they're smart young men, and they don't stay because they're young and ambitious. And, you know, there's this one kid that, you know, I knew him since high school, and he became a detective and up and went to New York. You know, you know, good for him, but bad for Cumberland. So I think that, I think we have to broaden our thinking. You know, I'm appalled to think that you've got to wait 18 months for a car. I mean, that's just astonishing to me.
But, I mean, you can't change it, so just, I wanted to clarify one thing, that half a position basically would be full-time in the next budget cycle. Just, this is not a part-time position. I just, one of the things that's always, well, not always been done, it's often been done is, instead of making it 106,000, let's say, for a year, start it at the 6-month spot of the budget and run it through, and then it gets funded in the next year. What would I like to do? I mean, you know, I mentioned Gorham and Cumberland and stuff like that. You know, down the road, it'd be nice to, much like our tactical team, your town has a member on our tactical team, is, you know, at some point, have a spot where, you know, we all provide services to, you know, some of the other agencies, the real small ones. But right now, like I said, it's, we're relying on other agencies who, they have their own, plus they're getting requests to do it, and it would be so much more efficient. You know, is one enough? You know, my Sheriff's Advisory Council goes, I'm kind of surprised you don't have more, or you're not asking for more, because again, everything's that. So, yeah, I hear what you're talking about as far as saving on some of the utilities and stuff, but we've got a big building down on 50 County Way, and it's hard to heat. It requires a lot of things that, I mean, I welcome any of you to come in and take a tour of the jail. It's, you know, and just see what kind of an operation we've got going there, because even with what we're spending on propane for the heat and stuff like that, sometimes, depending on the weather outside, we have to give blankets to the inmates because they're on a wall that maybe is not as well insulated as other places too.
Go ahead, Paul.
Well, I was just gonna ask again, and a little bit what I think he said, which is, you know, the towns, the different towns' view, and I'm gonna put the jail aside, because I think people are clear in the different towns on the jail side, and that the jail is serving all of Cumberland County, and there it is, and everybody, you know, goes through the jail. On the law enforcement side, I know I can say from Bridgeton, there's, you know, 'cause since we have a police department, and then we look to say, okay, what is our share as a town of, in this case, the 8 replacement vehicles? Because I was thinking that some of the things you were asking for in your budget were gonna really raise the prices that were charged to a Standish or towns like that. And that other increases, you know, would go maybe to the county as a whole, and that many increases would be split either way. You're adding something, and the contract you have with Standish, they're gonna pay, I'm just using Standish as an example, the lion's share of the additional cost. And, you know, Bridgeton will pay some small amount for the help that they get. And that's the problem, I guess, when I go back to Bridgeton and I try to say to people, well, you know, here, this is the law enforcement. It's difficult to talk about the whole picture of all the square miles you have and all the different things that you're doing, because really, as is quite natural, right? People in Bridgeton say, well, what is Bridgeton getting out of the law enforcement from Cumberland County Sheriff's Office? We understand we're getting help when we need it, and you've been, excellent about it. But again, with all these like individual items, I think it's hard sometimes for people to say, oh, okay, now I see how it all adds up.
So, a couple things. Everyone pays in, right, to the county. Standish pays extra
Right,
for the
correct.
contract. So, as I always tell people, general revenue is kind of like basic cable. Everybody pays into it, and you get certain channels. Standish pays extra for HBO, Cinemax, and all those other things, So they don't lose anything, they just pay extra money, like the PD, like your PD. I can tell you, we spend a lot of time in Bridgeton, a lot. So I can, you probably do get your money's worth there. But, we provide a lot of support for the PDs, especially around us. Now, I couldn't stand here and tell you that Cape Elizabeth gets a lot of our support. But I can tell you contiguously, Wyndham, Cumberland, Gorham, Bridgeton, Yarmouth maybe a little bit, get a lot of us going over, but they also come over and help us too. A little less, but they do. We've got two, well, we had two, one's a captain now, but we've got one individual that is a crime scene investigator. He's certified at the highest level, beyond anyone else. And we've sent them to crimes where they've gone and processed the scene and stuff. That's what you get for your county taxes. Canines, I would say we have one of the best canine groups of canine teams, to the point where when I mentioned Portland, our canines have come into Portland just to help out with some calls and stuff. And your question is not much different than the city of Portland. Why am I paying for Casco to get your services and stuff? The bottom line is that, I'll be frank, there's some police departments that have a police department because they want one. They don't have a lot of calls. And that's fine. We try to support those groups. And, but we have 15 out of 28 towns that we're the primary law enforcement agency for. So, yes, you do pay for their police protection, but we also, I never, very rarely do I deny anyone. If somebody wants help from our people, yeah, go,
Yeah, and I guess the point I'm making is that we absolutely see that, like, day in and day out. But as far as when it goes to budgeting, I think that's the thing that people don't quite understand, and I don't know if it's you or if it's Jim or if it's someone who can, break down these kind of accounts and say, look, the services for law enforcement that are, being provided to Bridgeton because of X number of calls, blah, 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 at, I don't know, $100 a call, pick some number, and this is the value that you're getting out there in Bridgeton, and that translation is what makes it hard for people to really see,
Can I add a couple of statisticians into my budget now? I mean, I honestly,
You've revealed my background now, sorry.
No, I don't, I get where you're coming from, but it's just, it's not the first time I've heard that question.
Can I ask you just some nuts and bolts questions on that specific position on the
Yeah.
computer forensics? So, as of right now, what you're doing is when you know you need computer forensics, is that coming from the officer that is handling the detective side of whatever it is? So they'll make the call to whatever department, or how does that actually get initiated? Because you listed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You listed 6 different options. So talk to me about how currently you are operating when you need computer forensics work, and how this position, again, I get you could go right to it, but I'm just trying to understand currently what you're doing.
So it's, the report is taken, maybe the deputy takes the document as evidence. Maybe it's when it gets to the detective part, and the detective, like the pellet gun thing. I mean, you know, that took place at a detective's level. They're investigating, and they need to put the evidence to actually put that person at the scene.
Right.
That's a good example of it, right? He says, yeah, I got the gun, but everyone has a gun, and I'm headed to work. And, yeah, I have to drive by this house on my way to work. So, you know, right now, we have a case, but it's kind of weak. You know, if you can line up the markings of this at the time when these crimes were occurring. And again, these kind of bounced around, Gray, New Gloucester, Raymond, and Casco. I think one went into Casco. So again, if you can kind of lock that in, then you can lock him into doing it and not rely on him saying, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, you know? The same thing if we get, you know, an allegation of child pornography.
Okay.
You know, the deputy is taught how to shut it off without destroying anything, and they accept it as evidence, and then it's brought in, and then we have to find somebody that can actually get into the computer and download the stuff we need to make a case. You're right, there's a bunch of, and there's probably, I don't know, Bangor probably has one, you know, and
But now you're way out.
you know, but my point is that's what our options are, so we just call around and say, hey, we need this, what's the soonest we can get it? And it all depends on if you owe, somebody owes you a favor, it depends on, you know, the immediacy. Sometimes we've asked for favors, hey, can you take care of this right now? Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. So really, those are usually, we're trying to retrieve evidence. A real big thing is evidence. And much like we can train people to do fingerprints evidence and, you know, go around and collect hair fibers and stuff like that, this is escaping us. And I would say that anybody who's not thinking about putting somebody that can do this in-house, it's gonna get ahead of us. And that's why we need to start. I don't think one is gonna be enough, because everything involves that, but it's a start. And we have the opportunity for the free training.
How many cases have you seen over 2020, last year, maybe the year before? Are you seeing an increase in instances where you now need to go out and get computer forensics in some form or fashion? Because I think you showed 6 or 7 on the screen there, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's increasing anecdotally. I had the numbers and probably on my desk. But, you know, our criminal investigation cases went up last year. They're just incrementally increasing. And again, if that's involved in everything, then there's a fair amount of, now, I'm not gonna say that every case requires a breakdown of this, but again, most of the cases are. We don't do homicides, so we don't have to worry about that. But, you know, if we're looking for missing people, we have a lot of missing people, being able to go in and actually, you know, have the access to ping and have that, find out where that person is, and where they're transferring cases. You know, an interesting case we had was, an individual had a bunch, about $200,000 worth of rare coins stolen in Naples. He was at a coin show in Manchester, New Hampshire. These people saw him and they followed him to his business in Greater Portland area, and then followed him up into Naples. And he went in for an hour to have a sandwich, and they broke out the window and stole this stuff. And, you know, I had an investigator, never would have thought of this, but he knew about geofencing and was talking about, yeah, we can somehow get a search warrant to, you know, see how many phones were picking up when this guy went through the toll booth in Kennebunkport. Now, was that helpful? He got a list of phones. But again, you have burner phones and stuff like that. So we haven't solved the case yet, but these are the things that these are being used for, because of the fact that, you know, we think we know what the car is, but we couldn't read the plate because the camera didn't pick it up. We think the individual's out of New York and New Jersey, $200,000 worth of rare coins. So, you know, again, just a couple of indications on the technology. And for most of us in this room, you know, turning it on is a challenge, you know.
I mean,
Sure. I just
like to add too that, with the technical expertise and the sheriff's using the phone as an example too, but also consider threats that are made. You hear on the news, threats made to high schools, something sent from Seattle to Maine and Sanford, there's a school threat. The technical expertise that it takes to be able to examine and extract the information from a computer, from a cell phone, from a Sony PlayStation, that can be used. Identity theft cases, financial crimes cases where there's computer, where there are ATM cards that are skimmed and reprogrammed and things like that. So there's so many things that we're dealing with. And if we have to go to the computer crimes, and when we do go to the computer crimes lab, it's a 2-year wait. If it's not a high priority, life-threatening case, it sits in a closet for 2 years, and the case is just, it doesn't move anywhere. You know, we have an opportunity where if we can fund the investigator, the federal government through the Secret Service has a program. We'll provide the training, they'll provide the equipment, the recertification, everything will be covered. There's other trainings that we could also send this person to. But what that would allow us is, we would have a priority that we could take care of our investigations. But part of the agreement that you sign on with the Secret Service is that if South Portland PD calls and says, hey, we've got a case, can you examine this? We're available to do that. So we're not competing with other municipal departments. Our hope is to complement with K-9, complement with I-Team, complement with ESU, backup. Whatever we can do to complement those agencies and work together is key. And there are people that have this training. There's just not enough of them. And even though the sheriff was able to identify 5 to 7 different organizations in this area that we have access to, the wait list is months and months and months.
Yeah, how long is training usually? Like you said, Secret Services?
So it's different levels.
Yeah,
So you
okay.
start off kind of like a base level,
Yep.
where the kind of you're dealing with like a PC or a laptop.
Yep.
And you kind of, so every little thing is kind of like an extra, kind of an add-on to that experience and training. So usually the basic class is a couple of weeks.
Oh, okay.
Go down in Alabama, kind of gives you the baseline, and that would certify you for this type of examination. And then, well, I want to get this add-on for cell phones, and I want to get this add-on for, financial instruments, credit cards, ATMs, things like that. So, and it's not just hardware, there's also software
Yeah.
issues too, things like that, so. Sorry.
Did you have a question?
Yes. Kevin, a couple questions. Do we have an in-house person or that we could use for this whole crime? For this whole program that the chief is talking about, and then maybe down the road replace that person with a blue pin, at some point? Do we have an in-house person or that we would train for this?
So if you're saying, put that responsibility on an existing position, is that
Well,
what
no,
you're
would
saying?
take that person, okay, take that person, is off the road, okay? And send them to the schooling, for this. And then, because we're always doing a hiring process.
Well, the person
But that-
would come off the road,
Right.
I'm thinking. I'm hoping that somebody, I've got a couple of people that I think would really gravitate to this because they have
Right.
a logical mind, But their duties would have to be picked up with somebody else. That's
Oh,
why-
I understand that,
That's why
yeah.
I'm saying,
Right.
to a certain extent, I'd wait, until, January of 2025 for this, because we could get some things in line and hire the people and stuff. But, right now, I don't have an extra person out there that I could just convert over and do this. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah,
Answer your
yeah,
question.
I understand that, but then I understand that 40 hours would have to be either were picked up on the overtime, or it could be were picked up, it's either way, it's gonna end up, what costing us, whether it's a per diem or person into that position, or it's, but could we start? So are you asking us to hire a brand-new person for this position?
No.
Or do an in-house that we have
Do an
somebody
in-house.
else?
It would be
Okay.
basically,
Yeah,
a couple of years ago, we have one DV investigator, and through these doors,
yeah,
gave like 20 hours a week.
yeah, yeah.
And I basically pile that on to a criminal investigator. So now I've got, really 3 non-specialties that are doing general cases. And the fourth one is doing general cases plus trying to do the 20 hours of DV. So that's a case where I kind of lost out on criminal investigators because he's distracted on 20 hours of DV, which I agreed to. This would be strictly this stuff.
This, right, yes.
And so we'd create a new CID position. So then by contract, we would put it out and hopefully somebody inside would take it.
Take it,
If not, then we could go outside, but my sense is somebody would take it. And then we would send them to the training and they would be the forensic criminal investigator. Then, if it's somebody from CID, their spot would be replaced by somebody off patrol.
Yeah.
Or if somebody came from patrol, their spot would have to be replaced on patrol. So it's a new position,
It's a new position.
starting 6 months into the next
Next
budget.
budget, okay, yeah. Okay.
Jim, you have another, oh, sorry.
Yes, I
Go,
have a
keep-
couple
Yep.
on, with the jail side. Did I notice that some of the items here with Jim and Kevin, with that we have flat funded? Was there a reason why we flat funded or some stuff? And if we have with the increase of the 3%, would that take care of that flat funded?
What are you referring to in terms of flat funding?
Well, we have, let me make sure that I'm in the jail budget, and I'm not in the operation and the maintenance. How do I know which one of these is jail and which one is up? Well, we flat funded here on with the vehicle repairs, well, for $5,550. But we actually spent 21,000.
So some of that is leftover from the old Board of Corrections. And we noticed that in the budget, that quite frankly, it's not a reasonable number. You lose a transmission, it's gotta be more than $5,600. I think we made a thought to try to put that into the fleet maintenance budget, because a lot of that, I think,
Yeah.
comes out of there, but.
Yeah,
Again, trying to be conscious of costs, because we
Right.
know that people costs went up, and that we know that we're in a tough time as far as getting federal revenue coming in. And quite frankly, the state revenue, because our numbers are not high.
right.
So we try to flatline a lot of things.
Well, okay, like here on the web, line 6512, okay? The actual adopted of a budget for 23-24 is with 35,000. We actually spent 40,000. And the budget request for 24-25 is with 15,000.
What is it?
For training, education, and seminars.
So, with the training and education, I guess,
Yeah,
so with the training and education, I
Yeah.
guess we found there were other things added in. We
Oh.
got in pre-employment, I
I
guess,
see.
tuition reimbursements in there, and then,
oh, okay.
new hire physicals are involved in that.
Yeah. So does that also, oh, in regards to the maintenance with contracts, 6514? We're budgeted in 23-24, 43,000, spent 69,000 in 22, and then we flat funded it back to the old amount.
Commissioner, we looked at that, there was a one-time unique expense
Okay,
in the number, that 69,000 that we thought that we would not see again.
okay,
So
gotcha,
that's why it was,
gotcha. And is that also the same for the cleaning supplies? We budgeted 100,000, spent 106, and flatted it for 100,000.
The hope of the cleaning supplies is that that's something of a leftover from COVID period where that was going up quite a bit.
Okay.
That one's been a tough
Yeah.
one. Similarly, the vehicle repair, if you look at that, I do believe we honored the initial request for an increase on that, and that actually went up to 10,000. We were seeing that it just was never coming in under
Okay.
on the right there. you would see
Okay, so with the 3%, that what Kevin did in his budget, do you think that's gonna cover the cost for the upcoming of a budget? Or should that go up to what we're allowed?
The budget before you has been reworked off of that 3% across the board. There's just not enough revenue coming in to meet every need, every line item. We are cautiously pushing the federal inmate line up, I believe about 400,000, 600,000. We're budgeting 1.6 million next year in revenue versus the 1 million, 1.5, probably 1.2 million. We're crossing our fingers this year. As of today, we haven't got any federal inmates, so there's a hole in the jail budget.
Right.
Our state revenue continues to go south as we are averaging somewhere in the population of 230, 250 inmates, which has lost ground against other jails across the state of Maine. And so, it's just a few years ago, we were like 19.5, 19.8% of all inmates across the state of Maine. Now we're down into 16, 17%, which has a significant revenue impact of state aid. So we are still experiencing a lackluster revenue stream. It was good to hear tonight that there might be an Oxford revenue stream, but we can't bank on that just yet. And we're in hopes that federal inmates come back to some extent. But we have yet to pin that down just yet. So we have built some of the revenue back in on the federal inmate, but we're cautiously optimistic that will come true.
Now, that I know in the past that we have talked about with the regionalization of services, and I think somebody here brought it up at the last meeting regarding fire departments and stuff like that. Is the jail something with that we can start to, do some regionalization of services? Because I know it's been talked about in the past, and I don't know where that's gone.
Yeah, I guess it all depends on what you're looking at.
Okay.
I will say, I did get a call from ICE today, and they're looking at maybe ramping up some of their people at the jail. I haven't talked to the major yet, and the chief doesn't know about it, but it was, as I was heading out, they have a renewed interest to hold a few more at the jail as well. Actually, quite a few more, but again, we can't bank on that until we get some more
How many do we have now there?
ICE, they've been kind of, sometimes we have 4 or 5, and sometimes we have 1 or 2. They've been moving their people. This individual was talking, 30 or 40, which tells me something's happened, because generally they've been only keeping them here a short time.
Right.
So, again, I think we got to flush that out a little more. Because I do have I have a tired staff, and I can't put any more on to
Right,
them, or
right.
we'll really be hurt.
Oh,
So,
I understand
answering your
that.
question on the regionalization, I mean, there have been times we've talked about, medical, getting one contract between 2 agencies and stuff, and sharing people, but, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of a struggle, because you have different philosophies as well, whether it's sheriffs, commissioners, taxpayers, so, often think about what else, could be done, so.
Okay, but that was it. Thank you.
Yeah. Right.
Commissioner Gordon, you have a question? can hear you. I'm trying to get you on the bigger speaker. For some reason, you're not getting picked up from the bigger speaker.
Oh, no.
I think it's important that we all recognize that the county is doing things that start to hold us together. I really appreciated the comment about what the county is now, same goals. And the simple answer is regionalization. And we have a number of programs underway and that, but what we really need is looking at the position exactly as it has. How does it save money? Then take action. Those kind of programs tend to be, my estimation, as in most governments, they're so
to be picked up because there's a suspicion of what happens and who's going to take over, et cetera. So it's a matter of building trust in programs that we do develop and put forth. Another question, I think, you come to the county budget and you look at almost half of our budget is consumed by jails. So when you start looking at what are all these issues and ancillary things that we do, the jail is the one that really takes on the money. And to that, I will now put on another hat because I do work with the Maine County Commissioners Association for legislation. And I don't think that the communities realize that in the last biennium budget, instead of our budget of what they give to the counties being increased by the normal 20%, we were flat funded. And that means that the state is not picking up the costs of those programs they've imposed upon the jails. And as a result, we have to look then, how do we do that? And of course, if we pick it up, it then becomes property tax. That's the big thing that the county commissioners are trying to do, is to prevent the state from transferring the costs from the state to the communities and through the property tax. The one thing we have done, and I think we just forget it because it's been, I think, 6 or 8 years now, we put big generators down to the jail and we use the waste heat for hot water. And that, I believe, has really saved us some dollars when you start to think of the consumption that does take place. And it's those kind of utilities that we take advantage of. Another thing that I will explain to you or try to put forth, although it doesn't affect our county, thank goodness, we're not in a tussle about rural patrol, but all the other counties are. The state police are pulling back their services, meaning they're actually extracting people from doing that function, which by law they're required to do. And so counties are picking it up because the citizen requires protection and wants people around that they can call and have some expectation that they're going to have a reasonable response. And what we're finding throughout the state, that you have somebody that makes a call and it's 2 hours before somebody can get to them. Well, you can't have that. And where is it? Again, the state is not funding it. So I'm not trying to push everything onto the state, but realize that your county, and as a commissioner, and I don't think the administration, our administrators are going to kind of put forth that, but the commissioners are very frustrated with the position that we're in. We're trying to serve the citizen. The municipalities are trying to serve the same citizen. We're beginning to work together and pick up some regional issues where we can save money for everybody, and we turn around and find out that we're not getting funded as required through statute. So I think I'm raising my hat to both the communities because I know they struggle, and I'm raising the hat to our county and our administrators because I know they push it forward. And in this particular case, we have a sheriff that is trying to provide the protection that we believe everybody needs. Thank you for listening to my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner, was that Commissioner Gordon? Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Gordon, appreciate it. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? Yeah,
I
go
just
ahead.
wanted to finish up. It sounds like your position doesn't need to be a sworn officer. It sounds to me like it's a technical, someone with technical expertise in computer science and that sort of thing. And it would seem to me that this position has a lot more value than just to the county. Because it sounds like the young fellow that we lost, this fellow name was Ben Burns, from Cumberland, who left and went off to New York. You know, he solved a crime because he was a quick study. You know, he understood how to work the cell phone or whatever it was, and I forget the details of the case now. But anyways, it sounds to me like if you made your pitch to all the chiefs in Cumberland County, because we're all getting ready for our budget season to have a budget, and you say, look, you know, I need $1,000 from every one of you, or something like that, to fund this position, because it has the value of helping Cumberland County, the sheriff's department, but the greater value is to the county as a whole, because we're not, the town of Cumberland's not likely to fund this position, but the expertise that this person would have, or looking down the road that two people may have, for as a resource, you know, we have a resource, and you know, it's you know, communications and dispatch. You know, that's a county resource. Well, this to me falls into that same realm.
So basically, we would contract, for lack of a better term, with a number of different police agencies, if they wanted to fund this position?
We're buying dispatch from you. Why wouldn't we buy this service too? Or, I mean, how? I guess it needs some creative thinking on everybody's part.
Yeah.
I mean, the county manager advice to us is not to fund this position now, to wait a year, not because of the need of it. It's a money issue, but so be a little creative in how you think about how you can get what you want.
Well, long-term, I mean, there's been negotiation, I don't know where we are, but of maybe a super substation in the town of Wyndham, going in with the PD and stuff. My long-term would be to bring together the towns that we have, because this is gonna get worse before it gets better. And maybe if that were built in, have like a little lab so that it was a regional thing for, you know, Gorham's got somebody, so they could work out of there. If we had somebody, I think Cumberland's got somebody, you know, they could go there and they'd have their lab and, you know, work on all of these, so that police departments would do that. You know, I don't know that Gorham and Portland and South Portland would be interested, because they got their own person in-house. But, you know, again, I've kind of thought of how can we do that? You know, is it a grant? 20 years ago, we wouldn't thought that we needed all this stuff, you know, but we're moving towards that becoming our Achilles heel. And, you know, I need it, but, you know, the world come to an end. Now it probably doesn't come to an end. It's just our service is not as quick a turnaround, you know. The other thing is the training. You know, I'm trying to seize the moment. Because right now, the Secret Service is offering the training and the equipment and all the stuff you need. So we put the person in, you know, I'm gonna eat through my budget. I haven't added in for all of the accoutrements that you would need for putting the person in a uniform and stuff like that. Because I'll eat that out of my own budget. We'll find some money. So really, if I get the person, I've got the training lined up, and we'll figure out the rest. The space, the vehicle, the uniforms, stuff that we need to do.
And
I wanted to make one point too. Going back to the jail, you know, when you look at the budget, a jail's much like an emergency room. You know people are coming in. But you don't know what shape they're gonna be in when they get there, and how much they're gonna cost while they're there. And I bring this up because of the fact that, you know, we were talking about flatlining. You know, we spend about $3 million, $3.5 million on medical. It's an important thing. We deal with a population that is very sick, probably hasn't seen a doctor in a while. I just want to let you know that in the fall, we had an individual come in that required a medication. He had a rare form of a blood disease. His medications cost us $13 grand a week. And over the 6 weeks that he stayed there, thankfully, he pled guilty. And thankfully, the crime he pled guilty to, he went to the state. We spent, out of that $3.5 million, one individual, over $100,000 for a medication that, you know, we were lucky because it really, the medication he was on, we were able to find a cheaper version at 13 grand a week, but it was around 16 grand. These are things you can't budget for in the jail budget, you know. And there's case law that basically says you have no alternative. I mean, they come in on it, you know, we have to give it to them, because doing anything less, we'll get sued. I only say that in the fact that, yes, we kind of back into the budget because of all these factors and stuff like that, but, you know, there's a real thin line between people being dropped off the jail and maybe they should be dropped off at the emergency room. And so again, these are all things that we do deal with on a day-to-day basis. I mean, when they told me, I thought they were just kidding. 13 grand a week, one medication. So, I'll shut up now. Picking up enough of your time.
No, and I just want to ask sort of a clarifying question, and maybe this is asking you to pick your favorite child. You've come in here, the two big asks are the the computer forensics, and then also the vehicles. Which one, I'll just ask you bluntly, which one are you more inclined to desire? Because my thinking is the 8 vehicles, you've got 8 outstanding. Are you asking for 8 because the tradition is we constantly cycle through and rotate 8? Or is 8 going to improve the services that you're able to provide on one side versus the position you're asking for?
So the rotation would have been 9. I cut a vehicle down to 8 in order to let the position go forward for the forensic investigator. And instead of doing it for a year at over 100,000, I said, well, I'll support it for a half a year, starting out January of 2025. So if you take that 53, that one vehicle I cut out from the original ask, which would have been on the rotation, covers that position. Had I done something different, then you'd be looking at 9 vehicles and no investigator. But I need the investigator, so I was able to let one car go from the rotation. Does that answer your question?
Somewhat. I think I'm pressing you a little bit.
Yeah, you are.
And you know, and I'm used to it. Like
I mean, you know,
I press a lot of my department.
So I
So
don't want to undersell the fact that, you know, we need vehicles. And I don't like the situation we're in with vehicles, but it's kind of out of control. And, you know, I was just talking to one of the individuals from the Sheriff's Advisory Council who's on the fire department. We had an individual, a deputy, that was en route to an emergency call a couple months ago, lights and siren, and the rear end dropped out of it. And it came down and hit the road. Now, that's got bad written all over it. And it wasn't an old Ford Explorer, but it wasn't a new one either. And the reality is, when I talk about vehicles, I just can't go out and buy a vehicle and put a deputy in it. It's gotta be a police package vehicle. So we rely on them, and rotating them the way we do seems to fit. And again, I'm running a risk of, I needed 9, I'm only asking for 8, because we want the position.
okay, that helps me answer. Yeah, Paul. Go ahead.
Let me take a stab at it maybe from a little different angle of like what this committee does, because we're looking across, and Jim obviously more so, is looking across the total budget of all the departments and what he thinks the people of Cumberland County can afford. And so in going forward with the different budgets, right, I'm sure, I haven't, he's got the detailed explanation here, but, people ask for things and he's cut things back, and people ask for things and they cut things back. I mean, that tends to be the way it goes. And I guess, to me, the good news here is that we're down sort of to brass tacks here of vehicles, which I think he has already bumped up in terms of his thinking, and there's one position. So it seems to me like the good news in your department is you feel, and hopefully you do feel, that your budget is adequate. Everyone always feels their budget is tight, but your budget is adequate. You got this one position really after, you bump up the vehicle costs. And, to me, when we're talking these kind of numbers and these kind of millions of dollars, it's pretty good that we're down to that level of discussion, that we can talk about one position. And on the other side of that is, the assumptions underlying that budget is, it seems like, and you can't count on the revenue, everyone keeps saying, but it seems like there's a possibility that, or more likely possibility that there'll be more revenue rather than less revenue. And I'm just wondering, as a timing thing, since you're looking for someone half year, and I don't know when the training window closes, but as a timing thing for the position, if there was some intermediate ground where you could do a checkpoint halfway through the year and say, hey, here's the revenue is running higher. Now we can fund this position, or say, oh, you know what, the revenue isn't really running higher. Maybe we need to bite the bullet and wait till the following year. I'm just trying to come up with some different alternatives.
Yeah, Bob Wood.
So there's a couple items here in the budget that jump off the page at me, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, so how can we find any money here? So I'm looking at a line item here, 5510, health insurance, and it's $2 million. And to me, that sounds like a lot of money for a small group of people. And then there's another one here, contract special services. It's basically $4 million. What is contract special services?
I'll jump in. That is the inmate medical account. So that is essentially the, at the jail, pretty much the second they go in, all other insurance goes right out the window. It's its own completely independent mini hospital in there. So that's the independent staffing through a company called Armor Correctional Services that provides the nursing and all of the medications. It also tends to cover oversight of them, so it's a very big line item that gets broken out quite a bit there. If there was a way to shave it, boy, we'd
Is that a
love.
3-year contract, a 5-year contract, a 1-year contract? And are there other vendors that might bid on that?
Absolutely. It is a contract that is probably on its third or fourth extension. It gets extended every year. We've been through this twice now. You don't necessarily get savings out of it. They're very similar. And we tended to notice that they seem to jump around companies. We're like, wait, didn't you used to be here? But that's contract special services. It is also done on what is called a cost-plus basis. So, for example, if it comes in under budget, we can actually get that back. We used to actually come in under budget pretty regularly. COVID changed that, and I think just the nature of the inmates coming in has changed that. We're just not coming in under budget on medication, or really anything anymore, in spite of the lower inmate count. So that's the long explanation as to what contract special services is.
And the healthcare costs there, does that sound excessive, or is that, can you compare that to the rest of the county pools?
I haven't done a per employee, but it is based off of a lot of employees. That's where that comes in. I can run it to see if it's running higher per employee. I run that off of a census
And
of
are
existing.
we in a pool, or?
A group.
MMA, same as
MMA.
everyone else. Yeah,
It sounds like he's looking at the corrections budget, which is like
Yeah.
over 100 people. So, man,
yeah, that's not
that
law
would bump the
enforcement.
number up.
That's correct, that's the jail that you're looking at. Law enforcement is actually a separate health insurance, but that's $1 million. And that's, the way we get at the health insurance numbers, we take a census of what everyone's running for health insurance at the point in time of the budget. So some people might be on single, some people might be on single independence. And we know that things can change, but we take a look at that snapshot in time. So we've got, X number of full family, X number of these, and we assume that for the next year, overall, that'll stay roughly the same. And that's how you can sometimes find yourself with departments with higher than average or lower than average for it on there. So I can come back to it on you, but I'm always going off of really what I'm seeing at that moment in time for the inmate, or for the corrections officers, or for the law enforcement or something like that. But it's always a hard number for us to swallow.
Yeah, yeah, all right.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Anything from this group?
As I said to my wife, we don't have a tax problem, we have a revenue problem.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, wish we could solve the world's problems today, but we'll stick with this. If there's no more comments or questions, I think this group will continue maybe doing some discussion. But Jim, if you are all set, I think this group can take leave, go home, enjoy yourselves, or do whatever you need to do. But want to thank you very much for your time. Thank you all for coming as well. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you.
So as we move forward, I think there's two questions I have. One is, under new business, we had providing answers to committee questions, and then I'm trying to remember what questions we asked.
We
or
didn't
what-
have any questions.
Oh, okay.
We put that on just in case.
Just in case.
There's always that open invite to
Yeah.
the committee to email us.
Okay, yeah, so then that's good. So then I guess the other question is, given today's conversation, we've had now 4 presentations, is there any additional discussion we want, or do we want to wait and sort of wrap up at our last meeting in February, or do we want to throw around some ideas or some thoughts? I'll let folks leave, but just chew on it for a minute. We've been here 2 hours, so, and I'm not curious what you're thinking.
I'm thinking it's time for a beer and a cigar.
I like your honesty. Fair enough. Yeah.
They did a good job tonight. I really appreciate their effort. And of course, what we hear, and it is a, it's kind of directed. We don't see the whole picture. We don't see any of the picture, really. We're just hearing a presentation. It's a powerful presentation, but and I do understand the replacement. You replace, a cruiser's like buying a loaf of bread. You eat it, and you go buy another one. So but I do look around the edges and think, we really need to, long term, we need to change some of the things about how we do business, and we need some engineering, if you will. When he tells me there's cold walls now at the jail, all right, well, maybe we should be insulating that building at some point as, long-term capital improvement plans on some of this stuff.
Any thoughts from you, Paul?
Well, I wish I was a jail efficiency expert, but I'm not. I mean, overall, the number is, staggering when you step back and you say how much of the county budget is coming to the jail. And again, I'm presuming there are people who actually are jail experts, and one thing, and again, everyone loves to depend on grants, but maybe one thing would be to try to hunt down some kind of a grant to study, what improvements could be made, although the danger with that is sometimes those studies show that you should spend another $10 million before you're really up to anything, so maybe it's best left unsaid, but.
Open that box, yeah.
Exactly, but I was a little struck at trying to figure out the, obviously it's the personnel costs that are a huge cost, and I was a little trying to get at the balance between how many people were needed as correction officers versus the actual inmate population in the jail, and what the balance was there. And I guess initially, and sometimes I hear them discuss it, how many open positions there are, and I'm thinking, oh my God, there is gonna be a riot there if you have, just on the face of it. But then when I see that, the jail is really at well less than half capacity in terms of inmates, it makes me wonder about the ratio of staff to inmate, and what would be, what would be the norm, and whether I've always been fearful that the money we're saving by having those open positions is creating a bad situation, but now I'm starting to wonder a little about that.
Well, one of the things, if you remember last year when we were talking about the jail, this committee was telling us, you need to right-size the jail. The jail is, we were still funding 128 positions, we had 75 vacancies, we had a population of 200 to 250 inmates, the 128 CO positions are based on a 400, 500 person jail. And so you were going right down the right road, Paul, asking that question, because we've asked it many times. What is the right number of correctional officers and command staff to run a jail of 230 inmates? And last year, prior to this year, we're actually talking about a live jail budget. Usually, the budget's approved, and we say, hey, by the way, we're going up 4% on jail budget, because it was always something that had to happen before finance really got their feet underneath them. Last year, we had to take a step back because we lost $2.5 million in federal inmates. We lost a couple $100,000 in state revenue. And so we were like, where's that coming from? We can only raise taxes 4%. So we came to the conclusion that we gotta start scaling this back. We have, say, 65, 70 vacant positions. Let's freeze 48 of them. And it turned out to be like 43 corrections officers, 3 sergeants, a records clerk. And so those positions are frozen. And we still have the ability to hire upwards, I think, about 20 to 25 positions.
Yeah.
Without even having that conversation, do we start dipping into the 48 positions that we have frozen?
Yeah.
So, your question was spot on. It was something that we did listen to the committee from last fall, not fall of '23, but fall of '22. And we started kind of doing that right sizing of May of '23, June of '23 for a jail budget that started July 1st by freezing those positions and unfunding them.
Yeah, well, I think the other good part of it is, I think the part you're looking at, which is if you add inmates, is add revenue producing inmates from the, from the federal program, from wherever, so that it's not adding inmates with no additional revenue. So, I mean, now it seems like the jail is in the position where if the number of inmates grows, it will grow in proportion.
The kicker on all that is we can grow all we want in inmates. We need the staff for the inmates.
Right.
So You know, we can't bring in, we used to house 40 to 60 federal inmates. We can't bring 40 or 60 inmates in.
Don't understand.
Because that's a whole nother pod. And then that's 9 more corrections officers to cover that pod over a week's time, three shifts. So, you know, as much as we want to bring in Oxford County and federal inmates coming back full bore, we also have to make sure that we're getting the hires and putting new feet on the floor so that we're bumping up our staffing capacity to meet the demand of the new and increased inmate levels.
Now, the hires, do they work independently? I know when we were talking about the full budget, right, there's an HR person and a recruiter,
Yes.
right, in the full budget. Is that person who's in whatever department it is that person work on jail stuff as well?
Number one priority.
Okay, perfect.
Number one priority is jail, second priority is patrol, third priority is corrections, and then everyone else follows suit after that.
So that, I mean,
And we are-
there's an actual plan in that, that's getting resources and is being put in place, and hopefully will bear fruit, and, you know, that's the difficulty of looking at the jail budget independently of the rest of the budget, is there really is some help for the additional help in this new budget for the jail from additional funding for the HR person.
And that HR person is paying huge dividends, and we're actually pushing more people through the process for the jail than what the sheriff's office can process. Because once they get all through the process, then they need to go and have a background check. And it's one person down in the sheriff's office is responsible for background checks, and whether it's patrol or jail employees. And then it's off to a poly. So once we get through a backlog of background checks, then it's a backlog of polys. And so you start losing people. Because, you know, today's 20 to 30, they got 6 applications out, and the first one to call them and say, hey, you got a job, they're going. And so we're trying to speed this up, and we will have further conversations with the commissioners in February and March about alternative ways of background checks. Because we really need to get more efficient in that regard to get the people on the floor of the jail.
So, just clarification, where, when you started, you kicked off this evening, the additional monies that you were thinking about adding to the vehicle line, I thought you had said would add 711,000, which would increase the budget to 8.7%.
It would bring the sheriff's office increase up to 711,000.
Right,
And the
okay.
sheriff's office would be 8.7%. The total budget would be 4.97%,
Okay, yes, yeah.
up from 4.86%.
Right, okay. I wanted to clarify that number, and I guess that's part of why I was pressing, is trying to figure out which is the priority and the need versus what you can scale back on this year. Because every percentage, the total keeps going up. Municipalities seeing it. And because we're pared down so much in our budget, and I'm already starting the process, that extra 3,000, 8,000, whatever it is starting to become a little bit more. And the reason is because ARPA's gone. So we don't have the fallback. And we knew that, but we have to be now very
We
cautious.
were shortchanged, I think, $200,000 from the state, just the town of Cumberland, a shortfall.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, it's what Commissioner Gordon was saying, is, you know, we're looking at, for a lot of people who are on the state program with the tax stabilization freeze, which, you know, we get 1 year's revenue for, but now those same taxpayers, even if we didn't increase our mill rate in Bridgeton, they're suddenly seeing the impact of that in their actual tax bills, where previously it was hidden from them. So as far as they're concerned, there's 303 households in Bridgeton, longtime residents, who effectively looked at their tax bill last year and said, hey, guess what, it's the same as it was the previous year, we got no increase, they're not paying attention to where that funding's coming from. And now, you send them a new tax bill with the tax, even, again, you're just using the tax rate from last year, let alone an increase, and all of a sudden, they're like, oh my gosh, my taxes are up, what's happening?
So my only jail budget, I think you've done well with sort of giving what the jail budget needs to continue down the path that we sort of started almost 2 years ago. I think the only thing I'm trying to chew on is the need for the vehicles versus the position. And I don't know if you've run that through your side of things, but I'm trying to just balance 8 new vehicles with a position that sounds like is the priority. And could you scale back 1 or 2 vehicles from that? And be honest about, you've already got 8 that you've RFP'd and have not even shown up. You know, because once you add, even if you are rotating, when it's added to the fleet, there's maintenance costs, there's everything else, so. That's
Well-
what I was trying to better understand.
The flip side of that was he was quick to add that he would be able, if he had the position filled, he would come up with the accoutrements, including a car, including this and including that, and the things he's listing that he could come up with were gonna cost more than, would actually cost more than the position itself, right? Because he said, oh, if you give me the position, I'll get the person a car, I'll get him this, and I'll get him that, out of my own budget.
I think he's looking at it, maybe he needs to look at it from a different light, too. It's, maybe this guy never leaves an office. He's, here's the data, you don't need a car,
Well, that's been a long time discussion about who gets cars. So if those 8 vehicles, who are getting those 8 vehicles? Are they all going to the deputies who are on patrol? Which one would think they are, but not all of them.
Right.
There are a lot of people down in the sheriff's office that have vehicles, and whether they're this investigator, whether they're people that spend most of their time right in the law enforcement center and not out on the road. So
they should be getting an electric car.
even there are 3 vehicles over at the jail, the major and the 2 captains at the jail. So that's been a topic of discussion for a long time, is the breadth of cars that get passed out there. And, if it was something that, yes, 8 cars are constantly rotating in and out of patrol, the patrol's the one that's driving all over this county. That's not necessarily the case. That 1 car that got cut was probably a detective's car for CID. They usually do 8 vehicles and then one for CID specifically. And they rotate every year. One person in CID gets a brand-new car, and CID is the detectives.
So just in trying to find places where we can do both, vehicles and a position, I think it's there, but at any rate.
Hey, give Ronnie Kopp a call and talk about cars, but he's pretty quick on his feet.
And let me just be straight up. I'm not opposed to this investigator. It's just the wrong year. And I said that to the sheriff. I said, I'm proposing cutting this investigator. It's not a bad idea. I see the value in it. I just need to be at a certain percentage to pass on. And, next year at this time, we could be talking about this position in the budget. It's not that I'm opposed to it. I think there is some value there in today's world. And I would accept it. But it's just this budget. We had other demands coming at us. We had a lot of demands coming from the sheriff's office with the union contract coming in and other things, other increases. I mean, we've seen a significant increase in cars alone that we've had to build in addition to what I announced this evening. So there's been a lot of stresses to this budget, and, we have to look globally at 14 departments and how we are going to address the needs of 14 departments. And unfortunately, we weren't able to meet some of the wishes of the sheriff's office this year. But next year's a different budget.
On that note, since I have to drive back to Bridgeton.
think
are we-
Yeah. No, I
we're
know.
wrapping up.
It's important that we reach out to the,
I'm
to
ha-
the other, the
15
towns
miles
in the
before
county
you.
and explain some of these things so that it can get to the ears of our town council. You know, I can try to remember to bring this up the next meeting I have, but I think, you know, we're trying to pass an affordable housing project in Cumberland, and it's very controversial.
I've been reading about that.
Yes. It's just across the way, and I'm hearing about it. So, only question I have, and then we'll step away. So I know that there's an anticipation as it stands right now, where you wanted to add for that vehicle line. Are we gonna go into our final conversation assuming that that money is already there, or do we just sort of take a step back and say, well, before anything happens, just take the budget as you had given it to us originally as is?
Well, part of the wrap-up that we have scheduled, I think it's the 20th of February.
Yeah.
Let us develop a game plan.
Okay.
For that extra money for the budget.
Okay.
Hopefully, we can figure something out that offsets all of it going on the tax rate.
Okay.
But I just received those quotes this afternoon. They were
Oh.
fresh off the press, but I wanted to be able to really come in here and say, yeah, I gotta eat some crow. I cut this budget too much, and I did. And so, let me, and Alex and Teresa go back and we'll figure out something.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Just wanted to know how to come in with a mindset for that,
Sure.
that meeting, so.
We do everything we can to try to avoid any changes whatsoever post-finance committee. Occasionally, small ones sneak in, but we try really hard to not have there be that variation, so.
Yeah, no, I appreciate all that you do. It's just, we want to make sure we're doing our part as much as we can, even though you don't think we have a lot of authority. I don't know. I try to sit up in my chair. Unless there's anything else, on that note, we'll adjourn at 7:20 tonight. We'll see you back here February 20th at 5. So, thank you all.
You don't want to move to Cumberland?